I think broadly they constrain SMEs. The number of hoops that we make SMEs go through, and that can be anything from 3 years accounts when they've only been in business for 6 months, which is a bit silly, but nevertheless, in some areas that's the requirement. The desire to get SMEs to fill in huge lots of documentation about quality and so on, each and every time they bid for a job. They're not actually, the public sector procurement people are not actually storing the information. Yes, it has to have a shelf life, fine, but if somebody's bid for a job within the past 12 months, don't make them do all that sort of thing. That leads to a great load of apathy, and apathy on both sides, I think. The sort of SMEs thinking we'll never break into the supply chain, and the public sector procurement people saying SMEs are a bunch of amateurs. Yes, I do. I think there is a long-term opportunity here. I think that once we get over the apathy on both sides, and we need to encourage organisations like the Chamber of Commerce, the Federation of Small Business, to help educate SMEs that there is good business available. I think then we've got a good chance of getting the SME attention. If I can quote some numbers at you, I know it's not particularly a good practice to do this, but the Welsh public sector spends £4 billion a year. That's a lot of money. 60% of that is subject to European procurement regulations, so it's massive tenders and aggregation and so on, which means 40% isn't. Now 40% of 4 billion is a lot of money. And when you think about the threshold under which nobody has to advertise a contract, and the threshold's 150k, £150,000 is not bad business for an SME. So we need to start encourage public sector to think about what they're doing when it comes to the small orders, and encourage SMEs to look for the opportunities, because nobody's going to come knocking on their door and say, here's a 150k contract, please do that for us. It actually constrains engagement. Aggregation is literally adding together the value of like commodities, which many procurement agencies are very keen to do, because they are brainwashed into price is the controlling factor. The total cost of acquisition, the long-term economic development of sources of supply doesn't come into it. Yeah. And I understand why. I mean, I think if a public sector buyer is under pressure, he's got to get it cheap so they can spend the money on other frontline services. It's an age-old culture that's been allowed to develop or fester, whichever you prefer. What you find is that people will look for the big quantities to get what they consider to be an economic price. I think the barriers to effective engagement are around culture, the culture of public sector procurement not being that interested in SME sources of supply. They're too much trouble. Rather place an order with a big outfit. There's a good chance I'll get things delivered on time. SMEs, conversely, need to have some relaxation in the form of the regulations that they have to comply to, and the best example is 3 years accounts when they've only been in business for 6 months should not disqualify them from bidding for a particular contract. I think also the notion of cost reduction, where the main aim of public sector procurement people is price. They've got to keep the price down, so the cost savings could be spent on other frontline services. And I understand that they're under pressure day to day to make cost savings, and so the first thing you do is go for the cheapest price, and the cheapest price is not always the most cost advantageous price, and certainly not always the best price in the long term. There are two other examples I think I can give to sort of knit those together. There's a Ginsters advert which says, "We buy locally. How lazy is that?" And I think that's brilliant. You know, they actually think about where they're getting their sources of supply and they try and get them locally and they use them in the product. Similarly, the Youth Hostel Association has one, "Eat the View," which means look out of the window. There's plenty of supplies out there, so go and buy them. Yeah. So I think that sort of overall change in culture and attitude towards buying locally is the thing that's going to be the real breaker of the barriers between SMEs and the public sector. I think the Welsh Procurement Initiative, now known as Team Wales, activity is trying to break down those barriers by communicating in a simple form. We've recently put together a manual which is really an idiot's guide to dealing with the public sector, but it uses simple words and it doesn't go on about regulations and so on. And it tries to make it fairly simple. This is the way you do business with us. The other initiative that I've seen attempted is in the Portsmouth area, where they're trying to engage SMEs in procurement because they also have a very poor record of the amount of business that gets placed with SMEs. So I think certainly as far as the UK is concerned, we're in a situation where we're trying, but I couldn't honestly say to you, here is a shining example of how it works. I think most people are aware of the need. The problem is it's show me. How do I do this? How do I go and knock on somebody's door? How do I convince them that I am a decent organisation? It slips back into the apathy and the culture bit again a little, in that if you take the Welsh SME sector for example, 60% of them consider Wales to be their market, which is a fairly damning indictment of their marketing outlook. Which means that if a local Carmarthen company has some decent business with Carmarthenshire County Council, they'll continue to do that. But will they go looking in Cardiff? Will they go looking in Bangor? Probably not, because the culture is not there. But then again, that's part of showing them how to do it. And it's not about lifestyle. It's about, in most cases, they don't know how to do it. It is very difficult for the SMEs to get involved in the public sector procurement circus. I think they have to use the Chambers of Commerce, they have to use the Federation of Small Business, because these are the organisations that do have a voice in Wales. These are the organisations that the ministers will listen to. And I think if we can get that sort of interest from those sort of organisations, and then they can spread the word to their members, because they have huge membership in terms of SMEs, particularly the Chamber of Commerce, where something like 80% of the membership is or are SMEs. And I think once that sort of message starts to get through, again it's about encouraging the engagement and trying to break down the apathetic barriers that have been allowed to develop.